It started, as most human mistakes do, with cats. When Earth's first radio and television waves leaked into space, alien civilizations were not impressed. They ignored our news bulletins, our declarations of war, even our advertisements for hair loss treatments. Most dismissed humanity's transmissions as the background static of a primitive species. But then came the cats. The first video, grainy, stuttering, barely recognizable as pixels, featured a striped kitten attempting to leap from one sofa cushion to another and missing spectacularly. Across the Orion Arm, battleships paused mid-broadside. Squadrons of fighters broke formation. Dictators, prophets, and hive queens all held their collective breath and watched the kitten tumble in endless looped glory. By the time Keyboard Cat reached them, the galaxy was hooked. Entire fleets abandoned maneuvers to watch a small orange feline in a blue shirt thump out melodies on a keyboard. Interstellar courts postponed trials because juries insisted on seeing just one more clip. Nyan Cat, that infinite rainbow Pop-Tart feline soaring endlessly across the screen, became the de facto anthem of 3 minor empires. Advanced civilizations that had spent millennia perfecting wormhole technology reconfigured their networks just to improve buffering speeds. A coalition of 20 species signed their first ever peace treaty after jointly agreeing that Surprised Cat was objectively the pinnacle of visual comedy. The galaxy, long divided by blood and ideology, was united at last by cats. And then the IRS found out. It happened innocently enough. Somewhere deep in the fluorescent-lit labyrinth of Earth's bureaucratic machinery, in a basement office where even mold refused to grow, an ancient server hummed quietly. On that server ran a forgotten program, a subroutine buried within the U.S. tax code since 1987. Its original purpose was vague, but like most IRS protocols, it was designed to equate any transaction, no matter how small, with taxable income. To the program, a download was commerce. A view was commerce. A single buffering kitten was commerce. And commerce meant taxes. So when alien IP addresses began pinging Earth servers, when entire armadas streamed cat compilations by the terabyte, the program dutifully flagged them. And, with all the enthusiasm of a government printer, it began spitting out tax forms. Not emails. Not warnings. Paper forms. Envelopes thicker than textbooks. Return labels longer than star charts. Postage due in units no one had calculated in centuries. The IRS did what it always does best. It mailed forms. The first reports were confused. In Sector 12, a sentient gas cloud received an envelope the size of a moon, labeled Form 1040, Individual Income Tax Return. The cloud tried to sign in vapor, but the IRS rejected the document as illegible. In the Andromeda Fringe, a crystalline hive being received a packet demanding they report fair market value of dependents. The hive argued that their larvae were priceless, but the IRS wanted a number. When they wrote infinite, the form came back stamped, mathematically unacceptable. Please round to the nearest dollar. On a quiet orbital station near Barnard's star, an unfortunate cephalopod opened his envelope and found a bill for $14.37 plus penalties. His crime? Streaming Cat Sneezing Compilation 2007. He tried to pay in sand dollars, but the IRS responded with a notice of deficiency, warning that continued non-payment could result in collections. Collections, it turned out, meant abduction. Soon the galaxy was drowning in paperwork. Flotillas diverted entire wings of ships to fill out W-2s. Hive-minds argued over whether they could file jointly. Civilizations once devoted to conquest now spent long evenings debating the definition of miscellaneous income. One empire asked, "What is a 401k? Is it a weapon?" "No," said their accountant. "It is worse. It is retirement planning." The forms themselves were incomprehensible. On distant moons, species that communicated through color tried to fill in the boxes with bursts of ultraviolet light. The IRS returned the forms, noting that the answers must be in blue or black ink only. Species that had no concept of money struggled most. How do you declare the fair market value of a sunbeam? asked a race of energy-based beings. Or the trade of 3 goats for 1 small moon? Their auditors shrugged. Line 14, Schedule C. And then the real terror began, the audits. At first they were rumors. A star cruiser parked peacefully one night would be gone by morning, replaced with a neat notice. Seized for examination. Do not obstruct. Entire colonies whispered about black vans, except in this case, the vans were saucer-shaped, shiny, and parked directly on the lawns of the abducted. In orbit around Vega, a merchant collective awoke to find every one of their shops tagged with bright yellow stickers. Under audit. Do not sell until cleared by Agent 452. A nebula-spanning alliance collapsed when its members discovered the IRS required them to file separately. And everywhere, the penalties stacked higher. Back on Earth, the IRS agents were baffled by the sudden surge in paperwork. Never seen anything like it, muttered one auditor, shuffling through a mountain of forms that reached his chin. Form 1099s from 3 galaxies over. W8BN signed in tentacle ink. Some joker even tried to claim warp core depreciation as a deduction. His supervisor sipped stale coffee and nodded gravely. Check Schedule E. That's where they always try to hide the warp cores. The galaxy, once united by cats, was now united by confusion. Where laughter had spread, dread now bloomed. Civilizations that had never known bureaucracy were forced to reckon with Line 42, Subsection C. Warriors who once feared death now quaked at the phrase, "See instructions on page 74. The cat videos kept playing. The cat. The kittens kept falling. The keyboards kept clattering. The rainbow Pop-Tarts kept flying. But every laugh ended with an envelope. And somewhere, in the endless corridors of the IRS, printers never slept. The IRS, to its credit, attempted outreach. A memo went out, translated into 6,004 spoken languages, 38 telepathic wavelengths, and 1 scent-based dialect that smelled faintly of citrus and regret, titled, "So You've Incurred a U.S. Tax Obligation by Watching a Cat." It included a glossary. Dependent, a person you support. Deduction, T, an expense that lowers taxable income. Withholding, V, amount your employer takes out of your pay for taxes. Simple on paper. On planets, less so. On the ocean world of Pelagia 4, a cephalopod scholar read dependent and pointed to a ring of tiny offspring clinging to his underside. These depend on me, he told the helpline. The hold music, a flute loop that sounded like it too was awaiting a supervisor, continued for a full hour before an agent answered with the exhausted cheer of a person who had long ago surrendered the concept of afternoon. Thank you for calling the Internal Revenue Service. My name is Carol. How can I assist? Do my brood count? The scholar asked, rotating proudly so the agent could hear the happy burbles. Do they live in your household? They live on me. Then yes, Carol said, typing with a speed born of despair. List them on Schedule 8812. How many lines are there? 4. The scholar counted 216 small, squeaking lives. I will summarize. Please round to the nearest dollar, Carol said, as if any of this obeyed currency. In the monasteries of Kar, monks who had not spoken aloud in 3,000 years debated deductions. The abbess, who communicated by slowly tinting her marble skin, presented a column of figures to the assembly floor. Can enlightenment be deducted? She pulsed in a serene mauve. We fund it with donations and frugality. A junior monk flashed a timid yellow. We did purchase those cushions. Religious expenses are sometimes deductible, said the visiting auditor, Agent 452, who had arrived in sandals and an aura of paperwork. He set down a stack of forms that leaned like a tired obelisk. But enlightenment itself is not a business expense. What of silence? They tinted, hopeful. We buy a great deal of silence. Agent 452 sighed. Silence is not deductible, earplugs might be. They considered this, then ordered 900 crates of earplugs and wrote ministry supplies on the receipt. On the comet market of Thrum, merchants rioted over withholding. "Who is holding what?" shouted a spice dealer, whose inventory consisted mostly of dust with stories attached. "You will not hold my credits." "I will hold my credits. I love my credits." "That is not the spirit of withholding," the traveling tax preparer explained, dodging an enthusiastic bag of saffron. "Your employer withholds to pay the government on your behalf." "We have no employers," the market howled, offended. "We have cousins." "Then you are self-employed," the preparer said gently, passing out Schedule SE like loaves to the hungry. "Congratulations and condolences." They took the forms the way people take medicine that promises side effects. The withholding confusion was global. On the ring cities of Zeta Lyri, an entire guild of wind harvesters misread the verb and stood, arms out, trying to physically hold the wind. The wind took this personally and left for a neighboring moon. Power outages ensued. A class action suit followed, filed under emotional harm caused by grammar. Elsewhere, terms collapsed under their own cultural weight. A silicon-based lifeform read standard deduction and assumed it meant what everyone else deducts. They submitted a return claiming the entirety of reality as an expense and wrote peer pressure on the line for explanation. Agent 452 sent back a polite note. "Please itemize reality." A hive queen from Arcturus asked whether her dependents included the 40,000 workers who would starve if she miscounted. Carol, back on the helpline, pinched the bridge of her nose until it considered quitting and said, "If you provide over half their support, yes." The queen did not sleep for 6 days trying to calculate the fraction of love. A trader who made his living swapping meteorites for poetry asked where to declare barter. The answer, as always, was everywhere. Then came filing status. Single, read a colony mind that had been one mind across 12 bodies for 9 centuries. Married filing jointly, read 2 gas clouds who had briefly overlapped in 4021 and considered it intimate. Head of household, whispered a weary matriarch who ruled 7 domes with a ladle and a promise. Agent 452 visited a society that reproduced by budding. He sat across from a friendly elder who had produced 16 smaller elders in her time. "Filing status?" he asked. The elder considered. "Single, but busy." "Head of household?" She gestured at a dome full of teenagers arguing over whose turn it was to re-spin the gravity. "If not me, then anarchy." Agent 452 checked the box with reverence. The Home Office deduction bloomed into farce. A courier service operated out of a comet and tried to deduct the entire rock. Disallowed. A bounty hunter claimed his starship cockpit. Allowed, then disallowed, then allowed again after a 9-page letter explaining ergonomic necessity, appended with a photo of his lumbar spine and a note from his chiropractor. He sits a lot. A hermit who lived alone on an asteroid and sold artisanal maps of nothing asked, "Is my entire life a home office?" The answer was yes, but also no, and please see publication 587. Credits and exclusions landed worst. A species that photosynthesized asked whether solar energy credits applied to their skin. "Technically, you're the panel," Carol said. "So technically, no." They were unconvinced. A miner tried to claim the earned income tax credit for ore he had pulled from an asteroid with his hands. He did not have a social security number, but did have 17 names, all of which he wrote in the box, then stapled to the form a small topaz labeled proof. The IRS stapled it back. A warlord attempted to exclude combat pay from income, claiming his job description was perpetual battle. Agent 452 asked for W-2s. The warlord produced a bloodied banner and 3 glorious songs. Disallowed pending lyrics. The helplines melted like wax under a summer sun. In a call center outside Boise, Carol and her colleagues worked 12-hour shifts beneath a poster that read, "We're here to help," and below it, in smaller letters, "Please be patient." The phone trees split like fractals. Callers impatiently mashed 0 until a recorded voice said, with great compassion, "Goodbye." Carol took calls in every medium: voice, scent, telepathy, fax, shriek. One particularly long conversation was conducted entirely in electromagnetic pulses from a nervous probe that had been accidentally appointed treasurer of a small moon. She stayed late to assure it that yes, it could deduct office supplies, and no, it could not depreciate the moon. Her supervisor, a man named Greg who had grown a second set of eye bags just for this season, brought donuts and said, "Team, remember, they're just as confused as we are." This was both true and unhelpful. Confusion metastasized into strategies. A black market of tax monks appeared, fraudsters in tasteful robes who promised to translate IRS for a fee. They taught clients to write "see attached" on every line, then attach a poem about sovereignty. A star law firm offered a flat fee to file cat video amnesty, bundling a century of views into one apologetic envelope scented with tuna. Early results were promising until a judge ruled that fish-scented filings constituted attempted influence. One plucky species tried civil disobedience by uploading a compilation titled "Cats Filing Taxes." It featured kittens batting at pens, jumping into shoeboxes labeled receipts, and sleeping on Schedule C. The video achieved galactic virality. The IRS, to keep pace with history, issued Notice 42F. Cats are not recognized preparers. The cultural mismatches grew tender at the edges. A pair of elderly beings from a planet where time ran slower arrived at an IRS field office carrying forms from 1913, carefully saved, never filed. "We wanted to be thorough," they said together. Agent 452 brought them water and quietly wrote "reasonable cause" in neat letters. A child wandered in clutching a TV remote. "We found this," she said. "Wrong story, wrong office." 452 walked her to the cosmic lost and found down the hall and came back with a look that suggested his day had become a genre. A choir came to sing their deduction claims. Carol cried into her headset and allowed the sheet music as documentation. Two terms finally broke the galaxy's spine: nexus and sales tax. On a world with no concept of borders, asking where a transaction occurred became a theological crisis. "Everywhere," they said. "And nowhere." State tax departments disagreed. A mountain of letters ensued, all of them beginning with "Dear Sirs," none of them ending with peace. A collective that streamed cat videos to each other across a cluster of stars asked whether they owed use tax on joy. Carol said no, then yes, then transferred them to a specialist, who transferred them to a voicemail that had retired in 2003. By the time spring arrived on Earth, a season the IRS described as filing, despair had set in. The hold music had burrowed into the dreams of 6 constellations. Entire empires spoke in line numbers. The cats kept tumbling, as cats do. The laughter dwindled behind envelopes. And somewhere, in a fluorescent conference room with a window that looked out at a brick wall, Agent 452 clicked his pen and stared at a case file stamped "non-compliant. Audit recommended for an entire spiral arm." He rubbed his eyes. "Abductions it is," he said to the room, which did not disagree. The vans warmed their engines. The saucers polished their chrome. Out among the stars, porch lights flicked on, and civilizations looked up, wondering if the next knock would be a comet or a clipboard. The first abductions were polite. A cruiser over Rigel received a neat notice taped to its docking bay. "This vessel has been selected for audit. Please remain where you are. An agent will be with you shortly." The crew, assuming it was a prank, laughed. An hour later they were still laughing, until a chrome saucer settled gently on their hull. From it descended Agent 452, clipboard in hand, pen already clicking. "I'll need to see your receipts," he said. Soon, audits spread like mold in a damp basement. Entire planets were tagged. Empires received certified letters stapled to their moons. One civilization woke to find its sun branded with the words, "Under review." The auditors arrived in silence. Not with guns, but with binders. They descended from saucers in pressed shirts and sensible shoes, lugging file boxes labeled Exhibit A through Exhibit. They did not roar or demand. They simply asked questions no one could answer. List all sources of income, they would say. An insectoid emperor proudly produced a pile of treasure plundered from 30 systems. Fine, said Agent 452, checking a box. And how much of this is ordinary versus capital gains? The emperor blinked his compound eyes. They are shiny. Shiny, 452 wrote neatly. Not deductible. In the Star Courts of Lyra, defendants were marched before tribunals, where the judges wore both robes and visors. Each was flanked by stenographers whose typing speed shook the benches. One trial concerned a hive-mind who had streamed 10,000 cat videos in one day. Did you derive personal enjoyment from these videos? Asked the prosecutor. We derived collective enjoyment, hummed the hive. And did you share this enjoyment with others? Yes, but only ourselves, who are also others. Judge frowned. So you both consumed and distributed. He banged the gavel. Double taxation. The hive wailed in stereo. Back in the fluorescent bowels of the IRS, Carol took a call from an alien in tears. They are here, whispered the voice. The auditors, they have clipboards. Remain calm, Carol said automatically, scrolling through the script on her screen. They asked for records. We have never kept records. We live in the now. Do you have any receipts? Receipts? Yes. Paper slips documenting transactions. A long silence. Then, we eat those. Carol closed her eyes. That's not deductible. She could hear them sobbing across light years. The most infamous audit began on a quiet asteroid where lived a cephalopod named Quarn. Quarn's only crime had been streaming Cat Sneezing Compilation 2007 72 times in one evening. He had been tired, lonely, and amused by the way the small creatures sneezed themselves sideways. He had not realized this made him a repeat filer. At midnight, a saucer landed in his tide pool. A beam of white light lifted him gently into the sky, wrapping his limbs in the sterile scent of bureaucracy. In the cabin above, Agent 452 waited with a clipboard. Name, Quarn. Occupation, cephalopod, occasional knitter. Do you derive income from knitting? I trade scarves for shells. Then that's self-employment. 42 slid across a form labeled Schedule C. Quarn blinked all 8 eyes. What is gross income? Everything you earned. What is net income? Everything you earned minus everything you spent. I spent everything. Then you still owe. Quarn's tentacles sagged. Why? Because you sneezed with cats, 452 said patiently. Quarn was not alone. Audits dragged species into windowless rooms where the clocks did not tick and the coffee did not cool. Whole fleets lined up outside portable IRS offices set up on asteroids, each with a flickering, now serving number sign that never seemed to move. The unlucky were shown into interrogation cubicles, sat across from auditors who asked questions like, do you own or rent? We are nomadic. Then both. Did you incur business expenses? We conquered 12 worlds. Travel expenses, then. Do you have mileage logs? We measure in screams. Not acceptable. Alien civilizations quickly realized that resisting was futile. The auditors did not shoot. They did not threaten. They simply sat, patient, until you produced a number. And when you did not, they made one up for you. Penalties accrued. Civilizations bled. One warlord, fierce enough to burn 3 galaxies, fled the audit room screaming after being asked to reconcile his Schedule A itemized deductions. He left behind his sword, his army, and his will to fight. Meanwhile, Earth carried on obliviously. Humans filed taxes as usual, complaining about paperwork, never realizing that entire galactic empires were collapsing under the same lines and boxes. Only the printers noticed. They churned endlessly day and night, spewing out forms faster than trees could grow. Somewhere in Idaho, a warehouse filled with nothing but staplers caught fire from the friction of overuse. The news reported it as seasonal. and in a small beige cubicle under fluorescent lights, Agent 452 paused his pen, stared at Quarn's trembling tentacles, and felt, for the briefest second, the cosmic absurdity of it all. Then he clicked his pen again. Next question. Desperation breeds creativity, and there is nothing more creative than a taxpayer who refuses to pay. The first loophole seekers were modest. A reptilian merchant tried to declare his entire hoard of gold coins as a business expense, reasoning that guarding treasure was his full-time occupation. Denied. A crystalline hive attempted to amortize their own bodies over 30 years. Denied. Then came the bold. On the smog world of Caldrex, a syndicate of smugglers set up an underground service called tax monks. For a modest fee or an immodest bribe, they would translate IRS forms into something approximating cents. Their advice was always the same. Write "see attached" on every line, then attach a poem about sovereignty. Thousands did. The IRS politely stapled the poems back to their returns with a note: insufficient documentation. Fraud spread like wildfire. A bounty hunter claimed 437 dependents, all named Steve. A planetary governor declared her war budget a charitable donation. An energy being filled out its return in bright flashes of ultraviolet light spelling, nothing to declare except love. It received a bill for $14.37. The hive-mind of Tau Ceti uploaded their consciousness into IRS servers to see what was happening on the inside. They returned broken, whispering only line 42, until they dissolved. Black markets flourished. Entire asteroid belts became havens for tax cheats. Forged receipts were sold by the kilo. An enterprising rogue distributed fake W-2s printed with Employer, Cats Incorporated. Others went further, selling audit insurance. For the price of a small moon, an alien could bribe a human tax preparer in Peoria to write a strongly worded letter on their behalf. It worked exactly once. Rumors swirled of loopholes, secret deductions buried deep in Publication 17 that might free entire empires. Some sought the foreign earned income exclusion. Others chased the child tax credit, bickering over whether eggs counted. One race tried to file for bankruptcy, only to learn that even bankruptcy required filing. Quarn, meanwhile, found himself huddled in the corner of a fluorescent IRS office, clutching a stack of papers so tall it listed like a ship at sea. His tentacles cramped from signing his name 8 different ways. "I do not understand," he whimpered to Agent 452. "You ask for records, but I have none. You ask for deductions, but I have none. You ask for numbers, but I live in tides." 452 clicked his pen. "That's very common. Then how does anyone survive this?" The agent paused. He wanted to say they don't. But auditors did not comfort. Auditors recorded. So he simply said, "Some find loopholes." That word spread through Quarn's limbs like caffeine. Loopholes. If others could find them, perhaps so could he. The breakthrough came not from smugglers, monks, or fraudsters. It came from a bored child on a distant colony. Her family, overwhelmed by forms, had given up entirely. She sat alone at the terminal, scrolling through clips of kittens tumbling into cereal bowls. When prompted to upload proof of payment, she dragged a file into the IRS portal without thinking. It was titled, "Cat Jumps into Box Final.mp4. The system froze. Then, astonishingly, it accepted the file. A green checkmark appeared. Payment received, compliance achieved. Word spread faster than tax liens. Within hours, billions of taxpayers were uploading cats in lieu of currency. A galactic treasury once drowning in confused receipts now drowned in felines, stretching, sneezing, knocking over wine glasses, disappearing into laundry baskets. At first, the IRS assumed it was a glitch. Then they realized the glitch had solved a problem no accountant could: compliance. Aliens were no longer resisting. They were laughing again, gleefully filing on time. Auditors, long starved of joy, began sneaking peeks at the submissions. Agent 452, late at night in his beige cubicle, clicked on Quarren's file and watched a kitten sneeze itself backward into a lamp. He laughed out loud, a short, startled bark that startled even him. Carol, fielding another desperate call, saw the screen light up with cat video received, and for the first time all season, smiled. Not everyone was pleased. Economists panicked. "We cannot run a system on cats," they cried, waving charts. Politicians debated whether cat-based revenue was taxable itself. A furious senator from Nebraska argued, "This undermines the dignity of our institution." But the galaxy had already decided. Dignity was overrated. Cat videos were eternal. Quarren submitted his return with 17 clips of cats playing with tentacles. He received a polite letter back. "Accepted. Please retain copies for your records." He cried tears of relief into his tide pool. In the monasteries of Kar, monks uploaded a compilation of cats knocking over candles. In the markets of Thrum, merchants traded receipts for videos of kittens pawing at spice jars. Even the hive-mind of Tau Ceti found peace, streaming cats together in harmonious stereo. The galaxy was united again, not by war, not by treaties, but by cats. And deep in the IRS, printer's word, not with forms, but with still frames of felines tumbling into bathtubs. Agent 452 closed his latest file, rubbed his temples, and whispered, "Maybe this isn't so bad." Then he clicked Next Case, and was greeted by a 10-hour loop of Nyan Cat. He sighed. And hit Approve. By midsummer, the galaxy's tax season looked less like a bureaucratic nightmare and more like a film festival. The IRS portal, once clogged with receipts and angry attachments labeled C Note, now ran smooth on an endless diet of cats. The system adapted quickly. Line 21, Other Income, automatically generated a prompt. Upload cat clip here. It became normal for alien accountants to say, "We're 3 kittens short. Can anyone spare a sneeze?" Families filmed their pets in increasingly elaborate ways. Kittens knocking mugs into gravity wells. Kittens curled in the cradles of meteor craters. Kittens playing with antimatter, strictly supervised. Carol, still answering phones in Boise, fielded calls that went like this. "Hi, I'm filing my return. How many cats per dependent?" "Standard is 1 cat per 2 dependents," she said without missing a beat. "And business deductions?" "Cats and ties, preferably near computers." "Medical expenses?" "Cats wearing stethoscopes." Carol hadn't been trained in this. None of them had. But after months of endless despair, this was fun. Agent 4522 adapted. He found himself smiling more, laughing occasionally, even forwarding the occasional clip to his supervisor, Greg. At first, Greg had scolded him, muttering something about professionalism, but even he broke down after watching cat slips on zero-gravity banana peel. Soon, whole auditor teams were swapping compilations between cases. One morning, 452 entered Quarren's file for a follow-up. Instead of stacks of disallowed deductions, it contained a single link. tentaclecatdancefinal.move. He clicked it. A kitten in a knitted scarf flailed adorably at Quarren's limbs, while Quarren made little squeaks of joy in the background. For the first time in his career, 452 stamped Audit Closed with genuine happiness. The system stabilized. Penalties? Waived if the video included a cat in costume. Interest? Forgiven, provided the feline was funny in slow motion. Amnesty programs? Entire fleets lined up to turn in decades of non-compliance with nothing more than VHS tapes labeled Funniest Cat 1988. The galaxy, billions of species across millions of worlds, was suddenly miraculously compliant. Politicians on Earth scrambled to understand it. Hearings convened. Experts testified. "Mr. Chairman," said one economist, pointing to a graph of plummeting deficits, "our coffers are overflowing in laughter." "What's the fair market value of a cat sneeze?" demanded a senator. "That depends," said the expert. "Is it high definition?" The chambers dissolved into arguments about formats. VHS loyalists clashed with Blu-ray purists. A lobby formed to recognize GIFs as legal tender. The Treasury Secretary sighed and added feline footage as a new line on official reports. In the monasteries of Kar, monks replaced their silence with a ritual, watching cats failing at jumps. In the markets of Thrum, merchants shouted prices in kittens per bag. The hive-minds of Tau Ceti merged their consciousness around a single truth. All deductions are better with cats. Even Mrs. Voss, the angry landlady from 3 quadrants over, relaxed her rent hikes after seeing a video of a calico getting startled by a cucumber. Civilizations that had nearly gone to war over deductions now traded cat compilations across wormholes. Peace treaties were signed with clauses like, parties agree to submit one monthly cat video for mutual enjoyment. The galaxy was united again, not by taxes, not by law, but by laughter. And yet, in a quiet cubicle beneath buzzing fluorescent lights, Agent 452 sat staring at his desk. The season was technically over. Compliance was at record highs. His inbox overflowed not with angry appeals but with cat zip attachments. He should have felt triumphant. Instead, he felt empty. Carol passed his desk with 2 coffees. Cheer up, it's the best year we've ever had. Is it? 452 asked. She tilted her head. You'd rather be seizing spaceships again? He thought about it. About Quarn's trembling tentacles. About the warlord who couldn't reconcile his deductions. About the monks who bought 900 crates of earplugs. No, he said finally. I'd rather have the cats. Carol smiled. Then file that under personal preference. Dropped a donut on his desk and moved on. Quarn, back in his tide pool, floated on his back watching kittens tumble endlessly on a waterproof tablet. His penalties were forgiven, his audit closed. He felt lighter than he had in decades. He whispered a quiet prayer, not to his gods, but to the small, furry beings who had saved him. Thank you, he said. May you always land on your feet. The tablet auto-played into cats in space helmets. He wept with joy. By autumn, the IRS formally announced the new policy. Effective immediately, all galactic tax obligations may be satisfied in the form of cat videos. Quantity to be determined by cuteness. Quality standards enforced by a bipartisan committee of auditors and bored 12-year-olds. The memo ended with a paw print. No one knew who put it there. And so the Great Crisis ended. Not with rebellion. Not with revolution. But with a tabby knocking a glass of water onto a laptop. In the end, the universe did not run on money or power or fear. It ran on paperwork. And kittens.